About. He didn't want to know anything about our. It's kind of cute. My wife
I forgot to take off my other to-dos.
You ready?
Very nonchalant.
Mark.
I'm ready, yes, sir.
Just give Eden just a second.
She was upset. Now the other
We're waiting on IT,
10 years old.
our EP.
Whatever. I think he cares about his
She did
food.
a spam email. And so I asked her to forward me the email just to make sure it went to the right one. And so I asked him if he would take the phone call.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny to see how they react.
Okay, welcome to the September 26th board meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Here.
Ms. Washington.
Here.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
recognition of visitors.
Bambi's not here.
Bambi's not here. Okay.
Marge Walker. And I have an idea about how the financing could be done for the busing. Bingo or some kind of gambling. If the Catholic schools can have bingo, why can't the public schools? That would be discrimination. Also, if there's a PTA or some kind of parent-teacher association who could be in charge of it. And the senior center on the east side, they have bingo. And they could be people that they could consult with. Also, if you put a tax on the property, I don't want to pay any more property tax. And if you're paying rent, you're going to be increasing your rent. So get off your butt and start doing something to get the busing going, because that is a problem with why kids can't go to school later, and having bus service for both the younger and the older school kids. I guess that's it.
Okey doke.
Thank you.
So,
Okay. Need a motion to approve the minutes for September 12th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario. Yes. Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
yes.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Old business.
Mr. Sturgill, just to, for the record, can you just do a official first hearing of the public? Can you announce, just to be official,
Skip that.
a first hearing of the public?
We did that.
You didn't announce
I didn't
first
say
hearing of the
first hearing
public?
of the public?
No.
Well, I thought I did. I'm going to have to speak up.
That was in a previous life.
I thought I read it. I'm getting old. Okay, any old business? Report and recommendation of the treasurer.
I have items 8.01 through 8.04 for approval.
Have a motion?
I'll support.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Ms. Nazario. Yes. Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
Yes?
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Okay, Jeff, it's your 901.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a couple questions from board members about, in essence, what is the current status of our attendance and what are we doing to make it better? So I'd like to invite up our experts on all things attendance, and Jeff Karuski, Dr. Stephen Sturgill. And as we refocus to some things in central office, Jeff Karuski is now actually in charge of attendance. That's his primary focus. He has many other responsibilities, as anyone who knows Jeff Karuski is aware, but attendance is what's first and foremost.
He's the food bank guy.
He's the food bank guy, yes. Many, many hats.
I like that, the food bank guy. All right. All right, we're good? Yeah, we're good. All right, so we're going to give a
fairly comprehensive update on attendance, but one of the things that we wanted to lay out on the front end is that we firmly believe that a healthy culture leads to increased attendance and increased learning. So when we think about attendance, we want to connect culture directly to attendance and not keep them parsed and separate from one another. So what we'll address here is just the importance of attendance. We have just a tiny bit of research, kind of larger scale and also on a more local scale. We'll talk about how we're monitoring data, and we've got really nice sources of data that we can use now. We'll take a look at our proactive approach, our reactive response, and then just a brief call to action at the end. And throughout this, we do think it's imperative that we acknowledge that for a while now, we have encouraged families to keep their kids home. So if you suspected, illness at any point over the last couple of years, we encouraged you to stay home. So we have to acknowledge that on the front end, because some of our attendance data does look pretty ugly for the last couple of years and before, but especially the last couple of years. But some of that is our own doing in our attempts to keep people safe from illness. So a few definitions here just to make sure we're on the same page. Daily attendance at the top there, just the percent of students that are present each day. And then down below, all these are straight from the Ohio Department of Education's definitions. So habitual truancy, and you can see the table that goes across with 30 hours, then 42, then 72. Then excessive absences, and then chronic absenteeism. And chronic absenteeism is the bottom line. That's the bottom line that we report to the state, that goes into the report card. It's a part of our benchmark target to get out from state takeover. So we have a target specifically written for that. And then there are some triggers along the way at each of those hours leading up to chronic absenteeism along the way. So we'll talk just a little bit the importance of attendance. This comes from the United States Department of Education. So it's not just about high school, but all the way through. So starting in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, you can see those students that are chronically absent are much less likely to read by third grade. We know it's a huge predictor for long-term success. Utah found that chronic absenteeism, even in 1 year, was associated with a 7-fold increase in the likelihood of dropping out. We know that students that drop out are much less likely to have healthier outcomes throughout the course of their lifetime. We're going to emphasize some of the data that we're looking at here, and some of that's derived from the first bullet point here from Attendance Works. But half the students who miss 2 to 4 days in September go on to miss nearly a month of school. So we've been watching our attendance very closely. This is Attendance Awareness Month across the state of Ohio. And we'll show you where we are here coming up here in a couple of minutes. 6th grade is a real important hinge point. And again, 10% of school, or about 18 days, which applies to us for chronic absenteeism, is a big hinge point. Students that miss that or more have much worse outcomes. And we'll show some of our data that supports that.
Before you leave that slide, Attendance Awareness Month, for the good of the order, for those who are watching, what does that really entail?
It entails do everything in your power to get kids to school. On our end, to identify barriers that are in place that we need to remove to make sure our kids can get to school. On the family side of things, it's a reminder of the importance of attendance and doing everything in your power to send your kids to school. Just that it's a collective effort and in just an increased awareness on the importance of kids actively participating in school every day.
So does this month have any bearing that's different from maybe February, or if it's just because it's so early in the year that we just want everybody to get? Okay,
Yep.
very good,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
And I also think, Ross, it's important to, it starts out creating the positive programming that can take place, the incentive programs that are being established that will be carried out throughout the year.
Thank you.
Just again, for clarification, this is all HB 410 stuff, the numbers that you're using, right?
Yes.
No? Yeah, okay, it is.
Some of it, no, there's other, like the U.S. Department of Education.
Right,
and,
but I mean,
yeah.
the trips and the, can we go over what the district's legal responsibility is in those trips, so that it's not somebody coming and saying, why are you why are you sending a letter to the courts about my son or daughter when it's not Lorain's idea, it's HB 410 requiring that? It's really an unwieldy process, I believe.
Yeah,
But
and
7 minutes ahead of us.
yeah, we're ahead of the game.
You get there, yeah.
But
Okay, pray go.
But we'll begin. But we'll begin with the end in mind too, to kind of say, while those pieces are hugely like, important relative to triggers on steps that we do, what we're also really going to be talking about is environmentally what we can do to encourage that attendance. We've lived, I think, around this table and in other parts, we've lived a time where, we were often referring our troubles out to the courts, and that didn't produce better results for us. If anything, it hurt the relationship between school and home. So, our focus here is trying to improve those relationships, because this is the place, and we've talked about this in other meetings, this is the place that you want to be, you're more likely to come. If this is a community hub, we're more likely to be engaged with all of the barriers, and then being able to collectively as a community remove those. Because attendance, it's not just a school issue. We're not going to solve it alone, and those are the things that we're going to talk about as we go through the slides. But you're right, there is definitely a legal component relative to reporting, documenting of interventions, things of that nature.
And I just don't want that to seem like it's us doing that.
And that's why we want to lay out the importance of the attendance on the front end, and what we're doing proactively around relationships and culture, and how we respond in a loving, kind, supportive way, not in a punitive court-based type of an approach.
So I remember last year, quick story, sitting in a meeting with our school compliance officers, which carry a weight of helping remove those barriers and being a part of our attendance work, wellness coaches, I think, administrators, and what we were talking about also that we felt was really important were these facts. We do need to raise awareness to the facts of how important it is to come to school. One of the bullet points talked about 2 days a month. Well, when you think about it, it might be easy to say, well, it's just 2 days a month. But the domino effect of 2 days a month is what we're talking about. It adds up. And we want our students here every day for a myriad of reasons. But most importantly, it is for continuity of education. Missing a day, there is a catch-up component. And as an educator, missing a day of work is tenfold what I have to do when I come back. So, it's imperative that unless our students are really sick, that they come home. And we want to, part of our campaign work will be to share the facts, because we know when we equip our community with the facts, the community will respond in a positive way. But we got to get the information out too.
Can I add something, please? Even being late to school, right?
Sure.
If you're late to the same class, every day or a couple times a week, you're still missing that same class. Pretty often you're going to fall far behind as well.
And those hours add up. They actually still fall into the criteria.
That's still absence anymore.
Yeah.
So that is a piece that, historically, when we all went to school, was about, number of days absent.
Yes.
We're talking about hours and minutes, because, as you said, Ms. Washington, that every minute counts. So if I'm consistently late to first period class, let's take a high school example, that's going to have a huge impact on my, academic success in that class.
So there are a few things here that have really helped us shape our approach. And so the first bullet there is it's us taking a look at where barriers may exist and then figuring out how to remove them. So, and we'll talk about that in greater detail coming up. The second bullet there that's really key is engage students and parents in positive ways. So it really shapes how we're connecting, and we'll talk about our positive behavior interventions approach, but really working to create a positive, proactive, supportive environment where people want to be a part of it, and we'll show you a number of examples of that. And then the data, the last point. So making sure that we're looking at the right data, and we'll show you the data that we're looking at here to inform our approach as well. So just our target, and then some of the data that, again, is just to emphasize the importance. So one of our benchmark targets in our plan that we are still waiting to have approved is to decrease chronic absenteeism from 65%, which was our chronic absenteeism rate last school year, to 20% by 2025. It's really ambitious. That 20%, though, is a median number of our like districts when you compare us to other districts in the ODE formula across the state. So it's an extremely ambitious target, but it's also one that we believe that we can meet. A few years ago, Steve, you want to talk about this just a little bit, the study?
And if I could just briefly, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the 20%, which is our target by 2025, is consistent with where we were in 2015-16 era. Things escalated in terms of absenteeism, and of course, as Ross mentioned earlier, COVID was a time when things were horrible because we were encouraging people to stay home whenever they didn't feel well. So we do anticipate, it is a lofty goal, but we do believe we can get there. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, and so around 2012 through 2016, we were looking at our test results and its correlation with attendance. And so thanks to, I want to say Bill Oley, who actually, Bill's amazing when it comes to this data, but what we found out is that if you missed up to 8 days, you scored in the proficient, accelerated, or advanced range. So if you missed less than 8 days, you're going to score pretty well in our district. But if you missed more than 11.4, you're more likely going to score in limited or basic. So the data really showed that the kids who came to school every day did really well in our district, scored high on our test scores. Those who didn't were either limited or basic. Want to talk about
CMSD?
Yeah.
And CMSD, they have an initiative out right now. They started 6 years ago to really look at and target the chronic as it's directly impacting. And at what CMSD has done, and I actually attended their reboot, if you will, the reboot to attendance, and they saw significant growth in academic success as comparison to the attendance. So as it says here, 34% more likely to be off track. This is data that they collected in the beginning and was their foundation of a rebuild.
So we'll talk a little bit about data here next. So one of the keys for us is that we have common data across the system to look at. So we have two main sources now of data that we're using. Data out of SchoolNet, which organizes our attendance data for us in 3 different ways. We'll take a look at that. And then our district PBIS team spent about 4 months last year really studying, learning, and then developing our own referral process. We'll show you some of the data from that. We mentioned it just briefly last board meeting. We'll show you a little more updated data from that. So we can really be mindful of the types of behaviors that are existing in our school and be really, really laser focused on creating a healthy, positive culture. We also have a weekly meeting structure connected to attendance that we'll talk about, and then also monthly meetings for kind of culture that our PBIS teams are responsible for. So the 3 main data sources connected to attendance that we're looking at, and this is current data as of Friday. We're looking at chronic absenteeism. We're looking at 10% absences. So to this point in the school year, the percent of students that have missed 10% of instructional time, that when you project out, as a predictor to chronic absenteeism by the end of the school year. And then we're also looking at daily attendance. And these are the very reports that we look at and use. And Jeff, you want to talk a bit more about this?
Sure. So every Monday morning I pull the reports that you see up there, and that information is shared throughout the week in our attendance meetings. We hold a weekly attendance meetings. It's myself, the compliance officer, and building administration. What we look at is, when we look at our daily attendance rate, I do a comparison from last week to this week as we progress, but also comparison to last year's information to always make sure that we are staying ahead of where we need to be. Additionally, beyond the data that you see here, we also pull PBIS data. The PBIS data we look at, because there is a direct correlation between a positive school culture and attendance. And in looking at it, we look at the positive office referrals that are taking place. You'll see up here on right now, this particular school, you look at it's an 83.5% positive referrals. The goal is to get a 4-to-1, 4 positives to 1 office-based referral. Additionally, we break the data down, so when we have our weekly meetings, we actually break the data down, not only to look at, so we have a 4-to-1. The next question we ask is, what grade is that happening in? So to confirm that every child, our goal is to have every child be celebrated in a positive light. Again, the positive light, positive celebration gets the child to want to come to school, again, supporting a positive culture. We also look at the day of the week. Is there a specific day of the week that you see celebrations and/or office referrals? Because not only what you see up here is the positive, but we also look at the office referral as well to understand. We also want to look at time of the day, because once we break down this data, and again, we break this down weekly, we are able to then target specifically areas and times where positive and/or an office referral would take place, and then we can make adjustments, and that's part of the conversation, is making the adjustment to support. And then additionally, it looks at the last data point for a positive is to look at, are we kind to self, kind to others, or kind to the environment, kind to technology? Is a recognition of who are, or how are we celebrating our PBIS? And in this particular chart, 64.7% kind to others, which would be a child being kind, friendly, helpful, supportive of another child in the building.
And this is data we've never had before. So some of our individual schools have had data sort of like this, but that as a system we've never had. And so this is an opportunity for us to look at all those items that Jeff just mentioned, and then look to see, when we make an adjustment, did it work? So do we see then an adjustment as a result of what we've done, as opposed to hoping or relying maybe on an anecdotal, report? We can actually see it now, from a data perspective. So on the proactive side, and I think this is really important, we've emphasized with our leaders and repeatedly that we're really worried about the adult like the adult actions. So what we do to create culture, what we do to lead learning, and then the students, they're going to be the result of what we do. And so from a proactive side, we know again that the more positive relationships we have with families and with our students, the better our attendance is going to be. So one of our first biggest things that we're working on, we talked about this multiple times, and again last week at our last board meeting, but to really emphasize developing that culture of kindness. So again, kindness to self, others, and environment. We'll show you a number of examples here in a minute. The next thing, and we talked about this a lot leading up to last school year and again the beginning, for especially our secondary students, offer compelling courses. So this is where the arts expansion was really important for us. Our students told us very clearly on the surveys that they were way more excited about coming to class when they had an arts class. So having compelling, courses for them. We do have, each building has their own specific attendance and incentive that they have. And then Jeff talked about the weekly attendance meetings. And so there's a little more detail on that. We'll go into a little bit more detail yet here in a few minutes. And then we have an initial draft that we'll show you of staff roles that are specific to supporting attendance. So we'll get into that a little bit deeper here in a couple minutes. So just a few examples to see how we're really working to create a positive culture. So we've got some just nice pictures from a couple of our middle schools and high school, a couple elementary schools. So be the I in kind is kind of a nice catchy reinforcer from some of the students. Some students up here that are being recognized with certificates for either kindness to themselves, others, or the environment. Kind referrals here on display in one of our buildings. A nice collage of students with certificates. The high school did a door decorating. So here's one of the doors. And then Tony Morrison has a really nice video that we're going to spotlight here that their counselor, Bob Mariner, is doing. And his goal is to do a video that they catch every student in the school doing something kind that they can celebrate for everybody else. So we'll watch just a brief bit of their video from last week.
Hi everybody. I hope that your week of school has been going well so far. It's been a long week, but we got through it. We have more kindness to share. Hope you enjoy. Josh with me right now. Josh, you said you saw some kindness?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about it?
I be kind to Maya,
Yeah?
and I tell somebody to stop saying goofy to Maya.
So you saw Maya and some friends playing, and some of the other friends were being a little over the top. They were just being too extra, and they were being goofy towards her and saying goofy. And you told them to stop?
Yeah.
That's so good. Do you think you were being kind to yourself, others, or the environment?
Other.
I agree. You were helping Amaya out. You saw that she was starting to get a little upset, and you asked other people to stop. Josh, good job. Thank you. Give me 5. You want to wave? That's Marisol with me right now. Marisol, you said you saw some kindness? Can you tell me about it?
When we dropped the apple and didn't help her pick it up.
So it was lunchtime. We were walking back to our spot with our trays, and Layla's apple fell. And because her hands were all full, Journey just took it upon herself to pick up the apple and give it back to Layla. That's so nice. That's so kind. Do you think that's kindness to self, others, or the environment? I agree. Why do you think it was kindness to others? It's 100% a good answer. Marisol, thank you so much for sharing that. Do you want to wave? Hi. Are you with me now?
You get the idea? But we want to be embedding, teaching the expectations, reinforcing the expectations, not assuming them, and then celebrating when kids do show acts of kindness to themselves, others, in the environment, and recognize it in a public way. So there are a lot of ways to recognize it. Just think that's a nice example. Here's some more just reinforcers. So we've got, again, an example of a caught being great. A number of cards. We wanted to acknowledge all of you for your greatness. So thank you to everyone. Kindness comes in many languages, 50 acts of kindness. So our schools are working hard at creating positive, healthy culture because we know that it creates a much better feel and reason to come to school day to day. On the left side, we just have some minutes from one of our PBIS teams at one of our schools, and just reference here about how they're going to continue reinforcing. They've got, and this is just a great example of a PBIS team problem solving. So when they looked at their data, they noticed that one of the areas that needed some support was on the playground. So they did some research, and they have 3 different things for our staff to consider now out on the playground to encourage more positive behavior and then result in fewer officer referrals.
Hey, Ross, to kind of, just add some things to, so, the emphasis right now, our conversation is about attendance, and some may say, well, why are we talking so much about environmental? So to reinforce, even getting our students, if it was strictly from a compliance standpoint, to come to school, if the environment wasn't conducive to kindness, to engagement, then behaviors will demonstrate that students will do other things not to be here. So just saying come to school and students being compliant with that while they're here is not setting us up to be long-term successful, not the student, not the school, not the community as a whole. So yes, we are taking this broad approach towards emphasizing kindness. What's most important is that our community picks up on that as well. Like, this has to be, and I want to emphasize throughout this presentation, this has to be a community approach towards not only instilling kindness in others, but making sure that kindness isn't just conditional, right? Because there were instances that our students demonstrated where things may not have been so kind, but someone took the courage to step up and say, hey, that's not right. And that's how we get a chain reaction going. And that's what we're thinking about long term. So just want to put some more context around, and we'll get into the data and what we are right now. But someone told me the other day, we can't just live necessarily chasing numbers, but we have to live in the moment, and we have to have a long-term perspective too. So our in the moment right now says, we are going to instill this, knowing that long-term we're going to, reap the benefits of the work that we do now.
I also wanted to add that we do hold the weekly meetings, Ross, I know we've talked about this. We do hold the weekly meetings that we talk about PBIS and attendance. Additionally, each building, and I know you spoke to this a bit, but each building has a PBIS meeting where they have a team built within each of the buildings.
And Jeff, if you could please, for the folks who don't know what PBIS is, could you elaborate a little bit, or remind,
Sure.
I guess?
All right, so PBIS is really, you look at positive behavior and looking at how do we celebrate, create, and instill positive behavior within a school. And so part of what the team does is the team is constantly looking at how do we celebrate positive behavior. Additionally, how do we make adjustments to support where maybe there was an area that needed additional reinforcement to bring about additional positive behavior. So when we look at the meeting, we actually break down the data. So the PBIS teams as a school break down attendance data because they recognize there's a direct correlation between attendance and positive school culture. So again, it goes back to the culture of the building. But the PBIS team is, when they look at the data, they also look at what do we need to reinforce, what do we need to create, what do we need to celebrate, because celebrations happen in the classrooms with teachers giving out slips. It happens with the Be Kind cards and the different poster boards that you see throughout the building. So there's constant levels of reinforcement of celebration. And the goal is to make sure that we celebrate every child. Every child should be celebrated each and every day, each and every week in school. And so part of the PBIS team meetings that I've sat in on, there's that constant talk about how do we continue to expand the celebration to recognize every child and celebrate every child for what they do.
And again, having the data to do that is really important. So just to go back to the data that this is one of our schools' current data right now, and in the top left corner, it can look to see, are we at that 4-to-1 ratio where we're reinforcing as opposed to having an office referral? And they are. So we know we're on track with that. But they can look in the bottom left corner and see which day of the week those are coming through, and they can see that they're the lightest on Monday. So they may want to have a conversation to say, boy, we're doing great at the end of the week. Do we need to start off the beginning of the week, with a few more, or not? Maybe they're okay. That's the discussion, for them to have. They can look in the bottom right corner and they can see we are really acknowledging kindness to others. Our lowest area right now is kindness to the environment, and we don't have any kindness to technology yet. So they've got real-time data that lets them know, here's how we're doing and what we need to adjust. So it's all real time, and they can then make adjustments based on what they're seeing.
Ross, can I ask a question? No, how is this tracked for the students? Is this in their Power School, or how do teachers or paras, whoever recognizes this behavior? How is it tracked, or is it not tracked, or how does this go in the system?
So every staff member has an icon on their computer to make a referral, either both positive and office.
Okay.
And then that feeds into each school has their own file. It's not in Power School unless we have something that needs to be reported to the state. So it's some type of removal. But otherwise, it lives within the Google system that we've created,
Okay.
and then our PBIS teams all have access to that for their school specifically.
Thank you. And one other thing, if I want to thank Mr. Scott for bringing back the Being Great cards. This goes back to GJW days, and I have 2 GJW alumni, and this is amazing. I love to see this back alive. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd be remiss. I do have to publicly recognize Dr. Sturgill, who took the piece with him when he went on a sabbatical. He took it and brought it back to.
We
to
call
put
it
on the-
best practices. This is education.
No, but honestly,
Thank you.
the whole effort of the team to not only, it's one thing to have it, it's another thing for it to be meaningful. And I want to kind of add, and then I'm going to sit back and not say anything else the rest of this presentation, I promise. But I do want to emphasize too, like the recognition isn't just fluff. It can't be fluff recognition that's not meaningful. We're trying to build and foster relationships. So, I've been given, fluff recognition, and you kind of it's kind of like one of those, how are you doing, but you don't really listen type of things. We don't want that. We want there to be authentic engagement because for some of our students, this is rewriting the narrative of their school existence. As a principal, I don't know how many times I would pick up the phone and I'd get on the other end, what did so-and-so do now? And the emphasis was changing that so that when we picked up the phone, positive was expected. And that's hard work. That takes a community lift from the school base, and it's really imperative that we do this. It does take time, though, right? As educators, we want to be perfectionists. So we spend a lot of time focusing on what's not going right instead of looking at the assets, the things that are, the strengths that our students have and the things that are going well. So even though I may misbehave consistently in class, and I was that person, we often make fun of my fidgets and things of that nature. People didn't understand what I was experiencing as a student, and that may be for all of us, but it only took one teacher to change my narrative. Back in the 8th grade, Laura Myers was the teacher that said to me, hey, you have some potential, and she actually said this to my father, to be greater than what you are, that your average is not good enough, and recognized the potential I have. And I sit here because of other educators just like that. So there's so much power in changing the narratives, and not only for our individual students, but this is big for us as a learning community as a whole. I'm gonna step away from the mic. That'll be the last thing I say during this presentation.
I'm going to add, Mike. So it was Miss LaForest in the 4th grade at Fairholme for me. But when I got this, it came with a cheeseburger, a small fry, and a Coke. So let's step it up a little bit if we really want to make it meaningful.
All right, so I wrote yours. So did you say a cheeseburger?
Cheeseburger, small fry, and a Coke as a kid.
All right, so I'll
Little
see you
McDonald's
tomorrow. I'm going to be
card.
out to schools. I'll be stopping by.
No, I love
We
this.
have to take care of that blood pressure.
This is a great idea. I love it.
So again, I think what Barbie said is actually correct. I mean, the idea that, Mike's slogan caught everybody as a positive, right? You were born to be great, and it caught on with many kids and many families and changed the culture of the building. So just having that type of slogan, like caught being great or something doing great, is wonderful. And it took us 1 minute to write the cards out because we could right away know something positive with everybody up here and be able to write something very positive. It took us a minute. We didn't have to think about it. And so, and giving it to you, and how did you feel when you saw that that it's your actions and what you're doing meant something to us and what you're doing? It felt pretty good. And so it felt good for us to write it. It felt hopefully even better for you guys to receive it. Except for Mr. Cawthon, because I talked about Go Browns and how you must be impressed on Thursday night, but I still wrote something positive in the front row, right?
At least it's over.
So, Jay, to your question about requirements, Jeff, Stephen, you guys mind talking a little bit about then the legal components of House Bill 410? And
Yeah, so if you look up at the screen, a student who is habitual truant, the following will occur. Within 7 days, the student is triggered absence. The district will select members of the absence intervention team. And I can go through and read all of this, but what we do as a meeting every week is we literally walk through this step by step. 3 meaningful attempts. Our compliance officers go out, as well as we have had faculty, staff, go out to do visits. Preferably, we have the compliance officers that do that. We reach out and do everything we can to remove barriers. Part of, again, the minimum requirement is we make 3 calls, 3 attempts. The reality is we are attempting daily. We are attempting daily from the phone calls home. We have a robocall that goes out every time a child is absent. We also have the AIT. As part of the AIT, after so many days of absence, we are required to have a meeting. As part of this AIT meeting, we sit down and build a plan with the parent on what do we need to do to get your child back to school, what supports need to be taken to help that. We do utilize the wraparound support services. We have social workers. We have as well as guidance department that also supports. A student has 60 days to participate and make satisfactory progress as part of the plan that will be put together. On the 61st day, if after the implementation of the intervention plan, if that hasn't changed, we then start to look at the legal side. Again, going back to your question, Jay, we do follow HB 410. We do follow the legal side of it. However, we go above and beyond what the state's expectations are for us to monitor. The last resort for us is to utilize that mechanism. Our preference is to call and do what needs to be done.
No, I'm 100% in agreement, number one, because I know how unwieldy the HB 410 process is, and number two, if somebody doesn't want to be someplace and you're just threatening them that they have to, that doesn't make them any more likely to come. But I just don't want people thinking that, oh, Lorain's going to report everybody for truancy, and that's not.
That is not the case.
That couldn't be further.
And if anything, what we are trying to do is we will take that extra step or 2 or 10 or 20 or do whatever needs to be done. Our goal is to provide families with the supports and the environment as we change the culture in our schools and we start to build on the positive culture, all of the different classes that are being offered, the celebrations of coming to school. That that walks hand in hand with the changing and supporting of a positive attendance.
So just switching then to how we react then, our transition here is to be more rigorous than the House Bill 410 requirements. So and we'll walk through and Jeff's referenced a couple times the weekly meetings, and then also really defining our staff-specific tasks to support attendance. So we're not just hoping or not just asking, but we're proactively working to make sure that our students are attending and feeling good about attending when they're here. So talk in greater depth about the attendance side. You've been dying to talk about it.
I'm ready. Okay, so we hold a weekly attendance meeting. In the attendance meeting, again, as mentioned earlier, we have building administrator, compliance officer, and myself. What we do is we pull up data. The compliance officer does a report that he brings to each and every meeting. We review chronic absenteeism and daily attendance. Part of the conversation is looking at, have we reached out to the family? Have we provided supports that are needed? If we have not been able to make contact, what do we need to do next? Again, branching out. We utilize, as part of this conversation, we talk about what happens from the classroom, the teacher reaching out, the school reaching out, whether through the secretary, the administration reaching out, and we talk about all of the steps that were taken, but then we also put into place what's going to happen next week. So we leave the meeting, after we go through this conversation, we leave with next steps. The following week when we sit down, we review the next steps. When we review the next steps, did in fact, the compliance officer went out, met with the parent, found out what the issue was, aligned whatever supports and resources are necessary to change that. Additionally, if there was, we've had some issues with students with transportation issues, and we're able to address and adjust that. We've had issues with homeless families that we've been able to provide the support through McKinney-Vento. And then the last thing is we have students that are on our books, and our compliance officers, we're still working on this, students that are on our books but are not in the residence in which they are. So they are considered no-shows. So we continue to clean up the no-shows, but you can't just take a student and say, well, he's not here, and write him off, and you can't do that. We are required to go through multiple steps, and so we follow through with that as well. Once we talk about the attendance, then we revert to the PBIS, the positive and office referrals, and we start to look at and try to see if there's any connections between a child that is missing so many days and how they're being impacted with a positive and or an office referral. And the recognition is we need to create a positive culture for that particular child, so they target things to support. When we determine the next course of action, and if it gets to the point of letters, to Jay, to your point, HB 410, if it gets to the point of letters, that's the decision that is made. However, before we get there, again, we go through multiple steps to confirm that's the last resort.
I have a question.
Yes.
Who is a part of the AI team?
That's administrator, teacher, parent, compliance officer, if available, because of how they run so many meetings. That's who runs it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have the team of support that surrounds that right?
Yeah,
relative
add
to-
your counselor to the team and a social worker, so we have a complete team around supporting that.
Yeah. So it may start small, but then, having the resources available to be able to personalize the approach, because not everyone needs the same approach or response, and that's that's the real work, is making sure that our approach is personalized. House Before 10, in all its wizardry, is very canned. It's a canned approach, and we know that canned approaches just don't necessarily work in that manner.
So, yeah, and to their point, that's first AIT meeting, and once there's a recognition, and when you have the face-to-face conversation with the parent, that usually affords you that next step. What do we need to do? And that's where we go with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we've also been working to just be really clear about who does what for attendance. And again, not leaving anything to chance, but just with great clarity. So yeah, Jeff, Stephen, you guys mind talking through just what we've got so far with staff responsibilities?
All right. The one thing I'd like to point out about this whole conversation with HB 410, HB 410 is a very reactionary bill on the point of the state. It says, when you trip these, this is what's going to happen to you, and it's legal involvement. The plan that you're putting together is a very proactive plan to prevent those trips from happening and to try and improve things without threats, but by bettering our environment. Now, for that, you're to be commended.
Jay, thank you for that acknowledgement. Our conversation has always been proactive support, with punitive if as a last resort, but preferably go through multiple steps to get. So when we look at specific tasks, executive director of the family office, I review data. Again, I create a data report every Monday morning, facilitate building attendance team process, confirm state requirement attendance steps. There are specific guidelines that need to be followed for compliance under attendance, and I track that every single week to confirm that we are following, again, HB 410. There is an A, B, and a D that are reportable that we have to go through, so I follow that. Building administrator, they host the weekly attendance meetings. They review the PBIS and attendance data. They call families, either them or through designee to support. They conduct contact family to eliminate the barriers. Really, that work is happening with the administrator and/or the teacher that are working with families. What are your barriers? What do we need to do? And once they find out what those barriers are, then they reach out to our social workers, our guidance, our school counselors, and they support. So again, it's a multiple step, multiple layer. Our compliance officers, they pull the weekly data. They attend every attendance meeting. Most generally, they are booked 3 days a week doing attendance meetings. The other 2 days a week, they are doing the home visits. As I mentioned, as part of this process, they go out. So our compliance officers spend a lot of time out doing the home visits. They also implement the HB 410 requirements as required. They contact families, support, eliminate barriers. Again, they reach out to the counselors and to our social workers to, again, provide support. Teachers take attendance on a daily basis and confirm accuracy. They create and maintain a positive culture. Administrators do it as a building, but the teachers do it in the classroom. You want to create an environment, it starts there, creating an environment where children want to come to school each and every day, and so that's part of what they do. And they also implement celebrations. We have, you've always heard the office referral and the classroom, like the classroom handled. They also handle the recognition. So there's two levels. There's a building level, which falls under our PBIS, but there's also a classroom level, which falls under the teacher giving out slips and celebrations. Our social workers, we have social workers, they connect families to community-based resources, and they conduct home visits as well. We have a lot of our families that were supported during COVID, because I was responsible for COVID. They were supporting COVID families with connecting them to medical support as well as feeding through the pantry.
So just next step's kind of where we are. We're not done. We've got quite a bit more work to do yet, but we're in the very early stages of putting together an attendance campaign. We know that this, and Michael made this point earlier, that we really need to have deep community partnerships, and we've learned a lot. Jeff referenced his learning with Cleveland Metropolitan Schools. And one of the things that we took away from their work is just how deeply they've partnered with a number of community organizations to support a positive, proactive attendance campaign. We need a catchy slogan, and then how we really market it. And then also, just in an ongoing way, continue to identify and remove barriers. We don't ever want to just be in a spot to say to a family, well, just get your kid to school. When there's more to it than that. And so, for us, on our end, we need to make sure that we're listening and that we can really understand what the barrier is and then figure out how to help, remove it. And then from our families, we want help, every day to get your kid to school, and let us know when you have barriers so we can work to figure out what the barriers are. And the work that Stephen and Stephanie Alexander Johnson have done with wraparounds and with Jeff and with the social workers, our whole approach is just to surround the students and families with supports they need when they need it, and not criminalize it, not take a shame-based approach to it, but a supportive approach. And so when we find barriers, when families, if they can let us know if there is a barrier, then our job is to partner and figure out, all right, how are we going to get you to school in the most expedient way possible, and no shame attached. We just want you here because we know that we have incredible staff. We know the results for our kids when they're here are dramatically better than those when they're not. So let us partner together and work together. Anything else you guys want to add to it?
No, I think you were right on though, Russ, the partnership with the community. I think we need help. We need support. We need to focus on, I call them tomorrow's leaders. We create tomorrow's leaders each and every day at the schools.
If it was just one thing that needed to be done, it already have happened.
Right.
Yeah. Can I take the time to give the helpline at this point?
Yeah.
So it's 440-830-4357. So if there is something that is a barrier that might prevent you from, getting your child to school or why they can't come to school, call that number and we'll see what we can do and connect you to the services, or maybe we can provide them for you.
Yeah, thanks, Barbie.
And I'd just like to say thanks. And I know it was a long presentation, it was thorough, but I appreciate the work that went into it. But again, just to draw everybody's attention to it, and I think this goes without saying just based on the comments that were made, this is not a presentation that was created for tonight to show the community and our Board of Education what we're trying to do. This is what we do every day. It's what Jeff does every day. But we've got teams of people who are actively focusing on making sure our kids feel loved and appreciated and welcomed here. And I appreciate you guys taking the lead on that. Thank you.
So I'm going to have one downer moment. As you were making your presentation on about page 3, you talked about our plan that we put into implementation that still hasn't been approved. I went into cardiac arrest as you said that again, as I do every week. Have we got any further with that conversation? Because at the state level, they gave a whole year for us to get ready for taking back local control, in a sense, after they approved our plan that's now not been approved, and we still don't have an update now that the clock has started, what our benchmarks really are, because they've not approved any of them. Is there an update, or can we get a caravan together? In the past, this is what I would do.
Sure.
I would head to Columbus, and whether it was me and the other 2 districts, or it was me and a team from here, and say, the institutional knowledge of this is what you all said. This is what we all agreed to, and now everybody has amnesia. How do we fix that problem and not let go until we can have that conversation and get a definite, here's the plan that they've already approved, but now they say they haven't?
And first of all, there is no update. We do meet with ODE on a regular basis in their leadership, and they said that they've admitted that they've approved it verbally, but they said it's not official until we get a letter and it states it in writing. So we are waiting for that. Now, just to clarify, our strategic plan is approved. The benchmarks by which will be measured have not yet formally been approved.
Did we change anything in this?
Nope.
So it's still waiting from where we were a year ago, or maybe a little?
No, where we were, it was months ago, July 31st, July 1st?
We submitted our baseline data in middle of June. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my
I think
head.
the deadline was the 1st of July.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back when we took,
Yes.
And part of that
According
was
to
because we proposed conditional benchmarks. So remember,
Correct.
greater than or less than 50%. And a number of the data points, the iReady, the graduation tracking, we had no baseline data from prior years. So we needed to collect baseline data last year. But yeah, we submitted that in middle of June.
so I guess there's two things. Is there anything that we can do as a board to help move that along? At what point?
I will call ODE tomorrow and get an update on exactly where we are and report out to everybody.
And then
And that'll be my follow-up question is, who else do we need to talk to?
Absolutely, it has to be. And then my follow-up to that, back to Mr. Karuski and the presentation, it was a great presentation. You guys are doing a great job. My question as a board, is there any other additional tools you'll need from us to better do your job? Do you need any additional supports and help from us?
I think, and we're almost there, when we really dive into the community partnerships, we absolutely could use support there. Absolutely. To really, and I think the thing that was so impressive to us, and and like Jeff said, he went and spent a day with Cleveland, and we've crossed paths with a number of members of Cleveland's leadership team over the years, just how deeply they partner with community groups to support their attendance. It was something that I think is a real opportunity for us, and I think there's great chance where you guys can, help us, with that.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Just one thing that Cleveland, they do a phone bank every week, and they actually have the community churches. They have like 44 churches that one night a week, they actually come in to this phone bank and actually would call out all of the families of children that were missing to say the churches care about you, and you're part of our community. We're just checking on you to see how you're doing. So they actually utilize a lot of phone banks to make those personal connections. And the church is within that school framework. They do a lot of other supports as well.
That is great to know. We've had a number of churches reach out and say, how can we help? So that's a great thought. Thank you.
And a personal phone call really means, even a positive. A couple weeks ago, I got a call from my 7th grader's math teacher about how great she's doing, how positive she is in class. It feels good to get that. When my daughter was in, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade, the principal, once a week, he'd call 3 parents home with the kid in the office. They take their picture, it went up on their social media, but the parent got to call, or the child got to call their parent from the principal's office as something good.
Right.
They were excited by that. The parents, I was excited by that, and it was just a nice feeling as a parent, as a student too. They were excited as well.
Very nice.
Yep.
Thank you.
As far as Columbus goes and House Bill 70, I know the CLCE, along with the senators and the reps, I don't know, I think Miller might have a prior commitment. I do know that they are holding a town hall virtually. I don't know if it's beneficial for us or not to participate in, but they are raising awareness that this is still going on and we are in purgatory. So that is happening later on this month.
You're up, Bill. You're up.
Thank you. It's on me. It's on me. I was practicing wait time. I'm still up. I'd like the board to consider for approval item 9.01.
Motion?
Discussion. Yes, as I go through here, just open and honest, I see positions for bus driver and bus driver assistants, and I thought Auxilia was our bus company. Please explain to the public.
Appreciate that. And as we've discussed before, yeah, there's some, they do most of our general transportation, but in years past, we've had to use private companies to transport students who are either court-placed or because of specific educational or medical needs they have. We have some students who go to downtown Cleveland. We have some at the Cleveland Clinic, and we need to transport them there. And I think when we evaluated last year, we had one student that was almost $1,000 a day to transport. So what we've done is we've taken that transportation in-house. But in terms of general transportation in district, that is Auxilia.
Next question. Director of Communications and Marketing, I'm sure caught everyone's eye or will catch everyone's eye with Tony DeMacchia. Could you go through for the public his qualifications for
Sure,
that position and how he is a good fit.
No, sure, I appreciate that, Jay, thanks. And we talked before, and you hear the presentation on attendance and some of the areas, let's talk about creating a healthy culture within our schools, but obviously it goes within our neighborhoods and our homes as well, in relationships with the community. When Mark asked Ross what was the one thing they need, we need stronger community partnerships. And I would say that one of our biggest areas of growth or need is in that area. And we've had a position that's been vacated now since May for communication and community engagement. But I don't want to say it's redundant, but part of community engagement is communication. But the ultimate goal is to make sure that we have partnerships and strengthen relationships with our students, their families, our community partners, and our community members. And in terms of Tony DeMacchia, this job comes when it's the focal point of your job. It comes with some inherent challenges because it's not just a skill set, but it's experiences that you have. It's tough for an outsider to come in and quickly establish partnerships. Tony DeMacchia is a former board member. He is a former teacher in the district, so he understands the district, the insides of the district from every angle and every perspective, and knows our strengths and our struggles, and I think can communicate those well. He is active in the community. As a result, he already knows all the people who are in charge of or a part of the civic organizations, faith-based groups, political organizations. So he's got our foundations in the community. So he already has established relationships with them. He is incredibly passionate about the district and the community, and as a member, as a leadership position of the Boys and Girls Club, he has done similar work for the past 15 years. And when we talked about, the analogy I used is, we had a pickup basketball game going on and you're short one player, and all of a sudden LeBron walks by and is looking for something to do. So for us, it was just an opportunity to, in terms of community engagement, I can't think of anybody better. Or at least he's in a very small group of people that have all the skills necessary and experiences that allow him just to take off running. Anybody else, there would be, whether it's an outsider or somebody in a new position inside, there's a learning curve. And right now he can jump in and literally take off running. And especially as we talked about before, this is one of our areas of immediate need. And to find him, I'm just tickled excited. But again, this only works because there's a team concept. And Lisa Roberson is a member of our current team, and she is outstanding. And if you look a little further down on that agenda, I'm also recommending her for a promotion from coordinator to associate director. She's been here for a year and an absolute rock star in everything that she does. And there's a transition from being an objective reporter, which was her career up until now, and doing marketing, which is, she should be biased. We do great things. Her job is to help share that and establish relationships. And making that transition is difficult for many. It's been seamless for her. She is just absolutely outstanding. But there are many, many, many things that go into these jobs, and I think the two of them complement each other perfectly. You go everywhere from crisis management to social media, communications, website design, website upkeep. Again, the community engagement piece. There's so many different aspects to this that it's overwhelming. And I think the two of them are going to do a great job. The very first thing they'll do is what we did when I got here during my first tour, which is do a communications audit. Come in, find out what information our community wants, how they want to receive that information, and all that is aimed at to ultimately, so how can we engage with you better and more effectively? The COVID is not done yet, I don't know, although I think it was officially declared over, but things have changed quite a bit in terms of what people want to know, how we can communicate, and it's time to, again, re-engage our community. CBS is a top priority, Community Business School Partnership. And it's not just how people can serve us, but how we as a district can better serve our community and the local businesses. But again, there's a great need, and I just see him as being an ideal candidate to fill it, again, with Lisa right there in tow.
Thank you. I would make a motion to accept 9.01.
Support. No, you're good.
I would say discussion, but we've had that already, so.
That's why I yelled.
I was going to give you that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
I have to abstain. My daughter is on here. She's being hired as a para at Larkmore.
Okay, I'd like the board to consider for approval 9.02 to 9.06.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
No. I'm voting no on Leo's resignation.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Leo's going to be a big hit, agreed, just absolutely amazing. But he was offered a position doing something in the private sector that he just couldn't pass up, and I fully understand. I'd like the board to consider for approval items 10.01 to 10.11.
So move.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
Yes.
And Mr. President, that's all I have for you tonight.
Okay, I'll get to the end of this in a second.
I can't flip them that fast.
I know.
Okay. New business.
I would like to announce that the Titan family has a meeting on October 12th from 6 to 7:30. Everyone is welcome. We will be highlighting high school, everything great and fun about high school, but everyone is welcome. It's a family engagement, stands for Family Action Members. Mr. Sturgill should have sold that to us, Dr. Sturgill. Him and Miss AJ do a great job at leading the group, and we would love to see more members come out and have some fun with us.
Okay. Any committee reports or requests from board members? Second hearing of the public.
Thank you.
Marge Walker. It seemed like I've always got 2 cents to put in. Anyways, when you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club, it seems like I read an awful lot in the paper that they're so active with the kids after school, and they do a really good job. And I've often wondered, why doesn't the Board of Education or schools take some clues from what they do? Seems like that they get down to the nitty-gritty of things, and the kids enjoy it. And getting back to the bus thing, is that I didn't make it clear enough, is that there are so many things that the public can do to get involved and do something instead of just having their kids get up so early. I have ideas. I don't have anybody in school, and I don't want to pay higher taxes. And I don't think that they do either. And that they should be more connected to their schools and their students in doing something for them. And because I know I have ideas, I have putting a Ferris wheel in the lakefront because it's a good idea to get people to Lorain, and we have the greatest sunsets. That's it.
Okay. The next board meeting will be October 10th. It may be here, may be in a new place.
A brief update, we have to put in another door, so we're looking at probably November 1st to have our new place figured out.
Okay. And the reason I said that is I realize that some people can't really hear what's going on, and we're hoping to remedy that in our new location. We're hoping that everybody gets the the benefit of speakers that they can hear from. Okay. Executive session, we'll go into executive session for A4, and I don't believe there'll be any voting as we come out of it. Can I have a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Ms. Washington.
Yes.